opportunities, or if you guys just know someone that's looking for opportunities, we would love to talk to you. We would love to talk to them. If you guys can, catch us, we're gonna leave business cards in the back. Feel free to grab one. Find us on LinkedIn. Shoot us an email with your resume, with your friend's resume, whatever it is. But we're super excited to be here. Super excited to learn a little bit more today, and hope you guys enjoyed the event and the pizza.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
I was several times offered an iPad if I referred a friend, and I did. And I don't have an iPad. I do have their payment, though. So you guys should think about that. So recruiters seem to offer different things. Guys, like I've been told several times, go ahead and go to this link. If you guys don't realize, we are recording. We always record this event. Now, we also record a bunch of different events. I like to go to different events, and that little portable system goes with me and records different events. So if you guys are happy paying Udemy, go for it. If you're happy paying lynda.com, go for it. If you want to get it free, including the amazing coding commander that's in the back that I see her there, she has several of her videos on there. You can simply go to videos.BocaJS, as in the organization you're in, .org, as in organization. Then you're going to go ahead and see there. What I ask you guys to thank me for this amazing speaker we have is simply hit the subscribe button. That's YouTube. Once I get to 100 subscribes, I can have my dream of having youtube.com/BocaJS. So, woohoo, help me get there, guys. We have our website. There's not much to it, but if you guys are interested, there's websites in there, and in the future we might look at information. There's always a link to today's event. Thank you, Mr. APIs. We also have Twitter. I actually had to take someone's Twitter account from this because it's mine. It's mine. So if you guys want to follow me on BocaJS, I only tweet when there's events going on or when there's discount codes to the conferences around Florida, so you guys can follow it and find out information about it. Next year, we're going to have Cecil Phillip. This is a presenter I've had in many different organizations that I've done meetups, and he finally came to BocaJS. Actually, I think he's presented from JS. You guys have seen me present on WebSocket. Now see a professional. Next month. Talk about this month and a professional. Mr. Joel. Oh, wait. No, come on. So you know Joel, and everybody else knows here that JavaScript was invented by the Finnish. Did you know that? Because there's all the words that are Finnish. Hoisting, you guys know that. Closure, right? And he's going to talk about OAuth. So that was my joke. Thank you very much. Joel.
Thank you. Thank you for a nice introduction, as well as the great joke. Now the bar is set really high, right? Well, I'll have to up my game a little bit. Hello everyone, super happy to be here. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about security and why I don't like it and how you can actually not care about it anymore. So has anyone here ever built an application there where they would store a password in plain text in a database? Come on. Most of us did, I'm pretty sure. I did it, of course. And sometimes we do that as developers because we've got this idea. Oh, I'm going to build a new Uber of whatever it is. So you want to go, you want to jump into your code, and you start, and you're like, oh, I've got to put a screen so that my users can log in. And then, oh, I've got to put a screen so that users can sign up. And then, oh, yeah, those users, they will lose their password, so I've got to put a screen for a lost password. And the next thing you know, you're 2 weeks into your project, all you have is a login screen. I have a ton of repos on GitHub like that, so I built that over and over and over. So we don't really want to deal with that stuff. But there are solutions to help us with that, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. So a little bit about me. My name is Joel Lord. You can reach me on Twitter at Joel__Lord. I get super excited whenever I have a Twitter notification, so by all means, go ahead. I'm French Canadian, as you might have noticed by the charming accent. So that explains it. And I came here, well, for BocaJS, of course, but also because I was on a conference last week. It was Coder Cruise. I don't know if you've ever heard about it. Awesome conference. If you have the chance next year, 4 days on a cruise ship, listening to technical talks. It was absolutely amazing. But it also means that I'm still tipsy. Like, I feel like I'm still on the boat. So I'm not drunk. I'm just like coming off of a cruise ship. just so you know. All right. I'm a technical evangelist for Auth0, so basically my job is to learn about some cool stuff. And then I go to different conferences and I talk about that. So I get to travel. I travel a fair amount of time throughout the year. And for some reason, all of my friends, they all think that it's super glamorous. I mean, travel is not that much fun, but I'm a bit of a foodie at home, and they imagine that whenever I travel, I go to all those fancy places. They're like, oh, you went to Paris last month? Like, how was the food? And I was like, yeah, well, you know, it's not always as glamorous. And I don't know why they think that maybe it's because I spent some time on a cruise ship and I post pictures like that, and they're a bit jealous. But in reality, most of the time, I just like run from one place to the other. I'm a bit busy. I'll eat a lot of meetup food, also known as pizza. And whenever I travel, I don't necessarily have cash with me. Like I said, I'm from Canada, so I don't have US money. It's just a hassle to get the money. So most of the time, I won't have $1 with me to buy a slice of pizza. But what I'll have, obviously, is my credit card. So I'll go to the pizza shop, and small restaurants like that, they'll usually ask you to pay in advance, right, before you actually get served. So you'll pay, so you'll hand them over your credit card, and they don't know what to do with their credit card. So they hand you a machine, and you put it in the machine. That machine is connected to the bank, and the bank will actually authorize your transaction. So basically, it goes a little bit like this, right? So you've got your, you come into a pizza shop, and they redirect you to a bank so that you can actually have access to your resource, which in this case is a pizza. And then you're redirected to the pizza shop, and the bank says, yeah, he's all good. He's got 99 cents in his account, so you can give him a slice of pizza. And you're served. So that's all there is to it. So when I first started looking into OAuth, and back in the days, I mean, I looked a little bit into it, but like it's just like flows and like a bunch of arrows and redirects, and it felt a bit complicated to me, and I didn't really see the point. So I went back to storing passwords in plain text. But eventually, I got this new job at Auth0, and I kind of had to learn about it because that's pretty much the core of our business. So I had to look into it, and like it kind of made sense after I started looking into it. And like the more I look into it, I'm like, wow, this is like the best thing ever. Token-based authentication makes everything so much simpler. So I'll try to explain things in not as much as security terms and so on, but you know, we still have to go to some charts and flows, so I'll go through that. But basically, essentially at its easiest level, OAuth is simply exactly what we did with the pizza shop. So you have a website, it tries to access a resource on an API. The API doesn't know you, doesn't trust you, redirects you to an authorization server, and then that authorization server will tell the API, he's good, you can authorize this person, and it will serve you your content. So that's pretty much all there is to it. So why would you do that? The biggest reason to do that is to delegate all of the security stuff, or passing the puck. Is that too much of a Canadian reference? Are we good? Passing the puck? All right. So it's all about delegating all of that stuff to somebody else. So pretty much the same way as we started having those APIs that would just take care of serving the data, we can also have authorization server for which their own purpose is to actually serve you authorizations and make sure that they authorize people. So that's pretty much the main reason why you would want to go that route. I used to do a lot of PHP back in the days, from the early 2000s, late 90s, and up until 2013, basically, where I completely switched to JavaScript. And when I built my PHP applications, the way it would work basically is that you would build a login.php page, and whenever the browser would hit that page, you would serve them a login form. Then the user would fill their credentials. Everything is sent back to the server. Server goes to the database, authenticates that, ideally not in plain text, and then eventually it will send you back a session cookie. So that is just a cookie that has an identification number which identifies a session on the server, and then you keep track of the session of the user, whether he's connected, what he has access to, and all that stuff on a session on the server. But that had a few flaws. I mean, sometimes it can be a challenge to if you grow, but there's a lot of solutions that helps us now. So stuff like Nginx will help to synchronize the sessions between different machines and so on. But if you have this login.php page, one of the biggest problem with that is that it cannot be served on each one of the devices that want to access it. I mean, with stuff like Bootstrap, it makes it easier for mobile device, sure, but if you have a that is trying to access your API or your application, or even worse, if you have a conversational UI, something like Alexa or Google Home, then those devices have no clue what to do with a login.php page, right? So you need some sort of other mechanism to help you there. Who here did PHP? A little bit, a few people. If you did some PHP, you'll probably remember how messy your code can get very easily. So all of your code, everything that has to do with user management, is kind of all mixed in with your business logic, and it quickly becomes a nightmare. Other languages do that too, as far as I know, but I mostly know this one from experience. So if you've got your employer tells you, okay, let's build this new product, so you have to build a new product, you basically don't have the choice then to recreate this whole login process on for a different application. So your users will come in, and because if you're lucky, you might be able to share the same database, but in most cases, it will be a separate database. So your users, they will know that those two websites come from the same company, but they still have to register. So it's not a very good user experience either. And trying to share credentials to get some information or to post some information to another API. It used to be a huge challenge, especially back in my days. I remember when, back in the days, if you wanted to post something on behalf of the user on a MySpace page, for example, you basically had to ask the user to provide you with his credentials to his MySpace page. And then, because you had to reuse those later, you couldn't encrypt them, so you had to store those in plain text. So you would be very careful about the user information for your login on your application, but you would just store their MySpace information in plain text in your database, which made it so dangerous, right? And finally, you have a gazillion different accounts already. So I kind of touched a little bit about it, but people are tired of creating a new account for everything. When I joined OAuth0 in January, one of our policies is to actually have all of the employees need to use a password manager. And since I joined, I looked it up the other day, and I have about 180 different logins saved in my 1Password manager. Which is incredible. There's no way I can remember 180 different passwords. So what happens is that people reuse the same password over and over and over. Who here uses the same password everywhere? Yeah. Oh, there's actually a few people. Who here uses two passwords? One for everything and one for banking. That's what we do. And the second one is probably just the same one with an exclamation mark at the end or something. We all do that. Well, unless you're using a password manager. So, and it just increases the risk that one of those websites or one of those databases will have a leak or a breach, and all of that information will be out there in the wild, and people can access all of your different websites. So what can you do about that? That's where OAuth comes into play. It's not a magic solution. It's not perfect. It has its flaws. But it really helps to decrease all of those different problems that I just described. So let's take a look at the flows. So like I said, OAuth, a lot of flows, a lot of arrows. But it's not that hard. I'll come back to questions at the end if you don't mind. So there's a bunch of different flows, or what they call grants, in OAuth. Some are meant for machine-to-machine communication. There's some like very specifically for the IoT world. There are some for single-page applications and so on. I'll just cover the two that, as a JavaScript developer, you will most likely encounter. The first one is the authorization code flow. And it's the one that you should probably use. It's a little bit more secure than the one I'll talk after, but it requires a little bit more work for the implementation. So the way that will work is that you'll have your single-page application that stands on the laptop there, and you'll have a server behind it. So this single-page application will access a server, and that server will access an API which contains your secured data. So your server, when you'll do a request to it, will validate if the user is actually authenticated or not. And if he's not, he will redirect your browser to the authorization server. And really, you should redirect completely the user to the authorization server at this point. So you're being redirected to this other page. You do all of your login stuff here. One of the things that is nice with that flow is that you can always change the method of authentication. If you want to add two-factor authentication later on and so on, you can all do that on your authorization server. And the authorization server will send back an access code to your browser. The browser will take that access code, send it to the server, and the server will take that access code, and the access code is small string, small identifier, and it's super short-lived, like just a few seconds. Send back to the server will take that access code, go back to the authorization server, and ask for an access token. It will give you an access token and a refresh token. And I'll come back to tokens later on, but just keep in mind that's what you get for now. And using this access token, this is how you'll get access to a resource on your API. So the important part here is that your browser never had access to any of the user information. You don't have to deal with credentials, don't have to deal with the username for all you care, don't have to deal with making sure that this access token is stored and secured, nothing. All you have to do is redirect the user, and then you get an access code, which you delegate to your server. And then you have access to your data, of course. Now, you've got this concept of a server in the middle, but if you want to build something a little bit more quicker and you have simply an API and a single page application, the one that might be for you is the implicit flow, which works pretty much the same way. So you've got your laptop and you've got your single page application, sorry. It'll be the single page application's job to verify if the user is actually authenticated now. So we'll check for that. If he's not authenticated, redirect to the authorization server once again. Let the authorization server do all of its magic. Now the difference here is that instead of returning an access code, you're getting the access token directly. And then you can use that access token to fetch data on the API. When I said it's a little bit less secure, the reason for that is because if anyone gets a hold of that access token, they can impersonate you afterwards. So that's why it's a little bit more dangerous. Now you have this stored on your browser. You don't exactly know what's going on there. So there might be some things that could be potentially dangerous. Notice also that in this flow, we don't get a refresh token. Only the access token. So tokens. Who used JSON Web Tokens in the past? I'll have the people. Good. I'll talk about tokens in general, but a little bit more specifically about JSON Web Tokens because that's what we use. So sometimes I'll use interchangeably token and JSON Web Tokens, but keep in mind that it's just because that's the technology that we use at Auth0. So I mentioned two types of tokens. There's also a third one that will come in later, but let's forget about that one for now. Access token gives you access to a resource. And they have an expiry date, they have a time, and they will expire after typically a short-ish time. Now, security is never black or white. And there's nothing that says, your access token should expire after X minutes. It's really up to you to do the implementation to decide that. It's always a balance of security and user experience as well. Now, if you're doing banking application, you might want to keep that token valid only for, say, 10 minutes. And no more than that. Users typically don't spend hours in their banking application anyways, so it's probably decent for them to have something that is good for 10 minutes. And then you can refresh them if needed. If you're building an application that doesn't have a lot of sensitive information, meant for people that work in an office and they spend their whole 8 hours a day in this application, you don't want them to have to relog in every now and then, right? So you'll make your access tokens way, way much longer lived. And that's what gives you access to the resources, like I mentioned. Now, the other type of token that I talked about is a refresh token. So a refresh token is very long-lived. Could be days, months, years. It could be up to infinity. It doesn't matter. They exist. They're there for a long time. And what they do is that they can actually provide you with a new access token. So if you have a refresh token in hand and your access is about to expire, you can just use your refresh token, to get another access token. So now the first time I heard about that, I was like, yeah, well, why not make longer-lived access tokens then, right? It would be the same thing. The main difference between a refresh token is that it can be revoked. So if you've ever seen this screen, this one is from Google, so maybe some people have seen it. There's also this one on GitHub, which you might be more familiar with. You'll see all of the applications that you've logged in using, in this case, GitHub. They all have a refresh token that they keep. In order for that, the next time you log in into that application will be able to fetch a new access token for you. But at any time, you can go in there and say, no, I'll revoke the access for you to actually access this information from me anymore. So you can revoke that, and that's what you do here. You just revoke the refresh token. Without that refresh token, the application cannot access any information on GitHub on your behalf, and you won't be able to log in anymore. So you'll have to do a new login. Right, so that's what the refresh token is for. A token is a piece of digital information. It can be anything, doesn't really matter. If you've done Microsoft stuff, you might encounter WS federated something tokens. If you're into the XML stuff, SAML is typically what you would see, or what you might have heard about. It could be a custom string. It doesn't matter. Like, it's not defined in the spec. It doesn't matter. It's just a piece of digital information that is being transported from point A to point B. Now, JSON Web Tokens are the one that I play the most with. And to me, it makes a lot of sense to use them. I think they're easy to understand and simple and very lightweight and easy to transport all over the place. So JSON Web Tokens is composed of 3 different parts. You've got your header, your payload, and signature. So the header will just be an identifier. It's a JSON object that says, hey, this is a JWT. And by the way, I'll just stop and make a small pause here. Some people call it JOT, especially our competitors. And JOT and JWT, that's like the whole GIF thing. You know, it's like everybody's arguing about how we should call them. So JWT, please. JOT just like irritates me. There's no O there. Anyways, so that was my ranting for today. So if there's one thing you should remember, JWT. That's how they're called. So back to this stuff. So you identify this as a JWT, and I'm using this type of algorithm to sign my token. Now there's also a payload. The payload is also a JSON object, plain old JSON object. You can have register, they call claims, which is just a key-value pair. So you can have, some of them are reserved or registered. Sub is one. So sub would typically be the user ID. You could have stuff like EXP for the expiry date or the expiry timestamp of that token. ISS, which would be the issuer of the token, so who sent or who created that token. AUD is the audience, so who is this token meant for? So those are all things that you can use to make your system more secure, validate who that token comes from, who is it meant for, is it still valid, and so on. Apart from that, you can put anything you want in a token. Doesn't matter. So you can just put some information in here. I'm putting my name. Scope is what is typically used for permissions. Typically, once again, using a name of a resource and colon and the rights that they have. Once again, not defined in any standard. It's something that we see, but it's not the way that you have to use it. And finally, there's a signature. The signature is very, very important. Signature is what ensures that this token is still valid. So you take those 2 parts, you concatenate all of that, and you encode that in an asymmetrical algorithm so that nobody can really tamper with it. You'll have a key on your authorization server, and you'll share that key with the API, so they can both validate that signature, but nobody else can. So what happens is that if you add any information there, if you add a new key value pair in your payload that says admin true, then the signature won't match. So you can validate that someone has tampered with that token, and you can reject it. Take all of that, base 64, encode that, and you just concatenate everything using periods. And you've got a JSON Web Token. So as you can see, it's very easy to use, very easy to create. You can create your own library, but it's easier and probably safer to use a library to do those for you. But very, very easy, very lightweight, and you can send that over a URL as part of the query parameters, and you can send that as part of the headers as well, which is very important. If you have to play with JSON Web Tokens, there's this really cool tool called jwt.io, where you just basically paste in the content of your JWT or your JWT, and on the right side, you get all of the information extracted for you. It will also tell you if the signature is valid or not, which is when you're just trying to play with JSON Web Token, usually it won't be. That also shows us that the payload of a JSON Web Token is not encrypted. So anybody that gets a hold of your JSON Web Token can actually see all of the data that is there. So make sure that you never pass any sensitive information as part of the payload of a JSON Web Token. All right, let's look at some code. Everybody's familiar with Node.js? No? Yeah, 1 or 2 people? OK, good. Express? We're good? All right. So I'll go through the code of how to create an authorization server and an API. And of course, I try to keep things as simple as I can, because I don't want to be here for 100 hours. So don't use that code in production, please. But it's kind of there to help you to see the, how things work, and like at a very basic level. So if you want to build an authorization server, we'll start by we'll have an Express server. Of course, body parser, because Express still can't parse body. And I use this very nice library called JSON Web Token, which, you might have guessed it, creates JSON Web Tokens for you. And then you instantiate your server. Now, because we want to authenticate users, we'll need a database. So there it is, with passwords in plain text, because that's what I do. And after that, you have one endpoint that you really need on your authorization server. The most basic level, once again, so you'll have a login endpoint. Then you can have a catch-all for the 404s and stuff like that. Now, in your login, you will start by verifying is that a valid request, as you always do, right? To check the parameters. OK, I have a username and I have a password. And then you check if the user is in your database. Using plain text does make it a lot easier, though. Just check for the string. And then if there's not a user, of course, you send back an error message. And finally, you just create a token. So we've got a valid user. We know that it's in our database. It matches a real user. So let's just create a JSON Web Token. And in here, we'll use sub for the user ID. We'll give it a scope. And then I'll just add the username, just because I want to add some information as part of my payload. And then you give it a secret key. So in this case, I'm using my super secret. So this is only shared with the API. So your client should never have access to your secret key, or else you will be able to use JSON Web Token. And then I add some options. I say it expires in 10 minutes. And finally, you redirect the user back to the original application. So that should always be passed as part of the request to the authorization server. So you should say, well, please redirect me to this place when you're done. And this is what you were doing right here. You'll notice that I'm also passing the access token as part of my request right there. So as part of the hash part of the request. All right, and then we start our server. So the authorization server will be running on port 8080. Now let's build an API. An API in this case, because we're using OAuth, is a completely different server. We're not mixing all of that stuff together. So we've got our API. It runs on Express again, body parser. In this case, I'll use, and I'll show a little demo, but I'm using randopeep. So my API will just generate randomly generated clickbait headlines, because I know those. I like those. So that's what this library does. And then I'll use Express JWT as a library to help me to decode the JSON Web Tokens. And then we start a server. First thing to do is to instantiate this middleware called Express JWT. And I'll just give it some options. There's a lot of things that you could and should validate at this point. Who's the issuer of the token? Who is the token meant for? And so on. In this case, I'll just validate if the secret key is the same one as the one I'm expecting from my authorization server. And then for my API, like I said, I'll have 2 different endpoints. I'll have a headline, which will be a public endpoint, so anybody can get a randomly generated clickbait headline. And I'll have a protected headline, which is pretty much the same thing. It will randomly generate some stuff, but featuring yours truly in this case. You'll notice that they're both very similar, The only difference is that on the second one, I'm using a middleware, the Express JWT middleware. And then finally, we've got our catch-all, and we listen port 888. For the front end, once again, very easy. Once you get a hold, or once you have a JSON Web Token, you just add that as one of your headers. That's all you need to know. You add authorization header, say bearer, and you give it your JSON Web Token. So because it's lightweight and very easy to pass around, you can pass it as part of your headers as well. All right. Let's look at what this looks like. All right, so this is our application. Everybody can see it. That's good. So you can get randomly generated headlines here. A lot of fun stuff. Anyways, OK. And if I try to get an awesome headline, then it will give me an error. It throws me a 401, for those I can't see as well. So it gives me a 401 because I'm not authenticated yet. So I've been trying to access a resource without a JSON Web Token, so it gives me an error. All right, so let's try to log in. And now you'll notice that I changed to another server. So I'm completely redirected to my authorization server. And security people are boring. They don't like to do nice forms, so that's what it looks like. Sorry. So we've got this new, and you'll notice also that I passed it callback, and I gave it, once you're done, redirect back to port 5000, which is where my single page application lives. Now, if we have an incomplete request, it will throw us a 400, so it doesn't have a username and a password. Well, that usually gets me a laugh. Thanks. Oh, there you go. Is that better? Okay. Okay, invalid password will also throw me an error, the 401 in this case. So user not found. That's not the password I use everywhere, just so you know. All right. So I've logged in. So I have valid username and password. So I'm redirected to my application, and I'm redirected to the application with an access token parameter in here and a big string, which, to make it easier for you, I've just pasted right, or copied right there. And this is my JSON Web Token that I got from my server. So if I just take this, and I go to JWT.io, I just paste it in. You can see that I can actually read all of that, all of this stuff in here. So I can see, okay, well, he has permission to read, got a username. I've also added the issuer as well as the audience, so I can validate that on my server as well as the expiry timestamp, which should be in about 10 minutes from now. I also have a signature verified because I pre-filled this field with my secret key that I shared between my servers. But without that key, it would have given me a message saying that that the signature is not valid. All right, so now that I have my JSON Web Token, I can do many things. I can still access my original API, so I'm still getting that stuff. But now I can also get the protected route, so the headlines featuring yours truly. So I'm getting stuff like, is Joel Lord tickling bar staff? Getting into, oh, all right, whatever. So the only thing that I'm doing in here is that I'm basically just sending that JSON Web Token as part of the headers, as part of an authorization server, so now I can get access to that resource. I am also using it to protect different routes, so you can also use that if you're building a single page application. You can protect routes, but you have to validate if the JSON Web Token is actually valid on your front end for this, which can be a bit trickier. All right, so that's what OAuth kind of looks like. So it solves a few of our problems. It helps us. We kind of delegate some of that stuff. So everything is kind of stored in its own place. So now if you want to build on your front end, if you want to work on your front end, it makes it a lot easier because the only thing that you need to know or to do is to get a hold of that token, and then you just pass it with all of your future requests. You don't really have to deal with anything that has to do with authorization. If you're building a backend or an API, then the only thing that you need to do is to use the middleware, and you don't need to take care of anything that has to do with user data. If you're really into security and you really want to build your authorization server, then go ahead and build it, but then you can really take care of that and have a team dedicated to that. So that's where it really comes in handy. So that's for the authorization part, but there's also authentication. So I'll come back to me traveling. So like I said, I do a bit of travel. And I'll usually avoid those type of hotels. Anything that is a bit shady and asks me to sign a guest book, I'll try to avoid. I'll typically go to somewhere, middle range. And those places, when you come in, they want to know who you are. They want to validate who you are. So if I come there, and as I mentioned, I come from Canada, and whenever I go to the United States, not that I don't like the US, but I really like Canada, so I want to go back. So I want to make sure that my passport is not compromised in any shape or form, so as soon as I cross the customs, I hide it, and nobody can see it, and I keep it to myself. So I don't want to give them my passport. This is our social security number card, which is about the most useless piece of ID that you could have. So it has a number and a name. So if I give that to an hotel, they'll laugh at me. So that's not proving who you are in any shape or form. Like, yeah, well, it is my social security number. But no, it doesn't. And why is that? Well, there's no information. Nothing proves that I am Petar Petrovich. So what I typically use, and I told to a few people that I come from Toronto, I actually used to live in Quebec. And a piece of ID that I would use was my driving license. And it's funny, I still keep the Quebec driver's license for a good reason. That card is actually in French. It says permis de conduire, it says nom, date de naissance. So it's all information in French. But somehow people will still accept that as a valid piece of ID. And there's good reasons for that. I mean, it's obviously my picture. Well, not mine, but you've got a picture. You've got a picture, so you can kind of, okay, well, that seems valid. There's like holograms. If you twist it in the light, you'll see that. You all have the same type of thing in your driver's license, right? There's also a phone number that you can call to validate if this is actually a valid driver's license. So you can call there and say, I've got a driver's license. This is the number. This is the name that I got. Does it match? So there's a lot of things that are there to prove who I am, or to prove that it's a valid piece of ID. So once you trust that piece of ID, then you can validate that this information is indeed myself. It's indeed my information. And it not only has information about me, but it also contains different information like what am I allowed to do. So I'm allowed to drive a car, just regular car, not semi-trucks and things like that, no motorcycle. I need to wear my glasses when I drive. So all of that stuff is also there. So that's a lot like OpenID Connect. That's basically OpenID Connect's job when you talk in the OAuth world. There's a lot of confusion. Some people think that it's the same thing or that they're really related together. Not exactly, but really OAuth 2 is OpenID Connect is simply built on top of OAuth 2. So it's simply an addition that you can do on your OAuth server. There used to be something called OpenID, the OpenID initiative, back in the days. It was like the goal of having one single internet login, and you would have your internet ID. And anyways, it never worked out. It was a big flop. One of the big reasons being that Microsoft, Google, Facebook, and all of those giants, for some reason, want to get to keep that information about you for themselves. So OpenID Connect came in a little bit later. So it's just a layer that sits on top of OAuth 2. And it also provides you with an identity token. And this one is in JSON Web Token format. That's what the framework actually asks for. So that's why it makes it easier sometimes to use JSON Web Tokens all across the flow. But you could use SAML for your authorization server and then use JSON Web Tokens for your OpenID Connect implementation. So basically, the only thing that it does is that it adds a /userinfo endpoint on your authorization server, and then you'll be able to use an access token with the right permissions to access information about the profile of the user. Different scopes that you can access, you always have to specify I want to have the OpenID data, but you can also ask for profile, the email, address, whatever, phone number. There's a bunch of different things that you can ask about the user. Like I said, the only difference is that you will actually add the scope as part of the original request, saying OpenID and profile. And once you'll get your access code, and then with the access code, you'll ask for, you'll get your access token and your refresh token. But then you can use your access token to access the user info endpoint and get an ID token in addition to what you already had. So let's very quickly look at what it looks like. That's a JetBrains license. All right, so I just switched. I use the same code for both local thing and using Auth0. OpenID Connect is a little bit more work, and I was too lazy to build my own. But let's just log in. I will still log in using my Google account. All right. Now I'm redirected to my application. So we just went through exactly the same flow as we did previously. But in the background, Auth0 also asked for an ID token to their own implementation of OpenID Connect. So what I got back is not only an access token, which is pretty much similar to what I had before, but I also got an ID token. Now if I paste this in to JWT.io, you see that I get a lot of information right there. So I not only have the username and basic information, but I also have given name, family name, nickname, picture, gender, locale. There's a bunch of things that you get all of there. And that basically all comes for free whenever you're using a server that actually has an OpenID Connect implementation. The step that we didn't see here, because I already logged beforehand to test my demo in, but you will typically get a consent UI. So you would get a screen that says, are you sure you want to give this application the access to your profile, email, blah, 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 like we've all seen when you log in with using Facebook, for example. It will give you that screen saying, are you sure you want to give access to all of those to application X? Nope, not Slack. Please don't. If you're interested in OpenID Connect, it's also a great site to kind of see all of the flow and how things work and how it goes from the server, how you get your access code and what you do with that. A very, very interesting website, openidconnect.net, so take a look if you want. There we go. Let's skip that one. All right. So really, once again, it's all about delegation. So now you can not only delegate all the security stuff to somebody else, but you can also delegate all of the asking all of that information to the user, asking them about their profile picture, asking them about all that stuff. It already comes for you, basically built in when you're using OpenID Connect. So it makes it a lot easier, and it's also most likely a lot more safer to use, say, Google's implementation of OAuth or maybe Auth0. It also makes it a lot easier to delegate all that stuff to a team that actually cares about. And no matter how clever you think you are, a single developer working alone on a project will always build something that is not as secure as the team of like 200 people that are dedicated to that and like really into the security stuff and want to make sure to protect that data. So using Auth0, you can basically delegate all that stuff to people that actually care about, and that's why I don't actually care about security. So that's all I had, so thank you very much.
Guys, we have time for some questions. If you guys have some questions, I will run towards you and hand you the mic. No, we have some questions already. All right.
I'm just curious, what companies are using this technology today?
Which one? Well, a lot of the big players are using that. I mean, Google, that's what they're using. GitHub is what they're using. Facebook, they're not exactly using the standard. They're a little bit off, but they're basically using the principles around OAuth. A lot of the big companies, governments, financial institutions are moving towards OAuth nowadays. So it kind of became like the standard that everybody uses. And one of the nice things about it is that you can basically just interchange. As long as they follow the exact standard, you can easily change from one server to the other. So, or you can add different providers as well. So yeah, a lot of the big players nowadays.
You were mentioning the one developer and 200 developers. I remember the old saying, if one developer can do it in 1 month, 2 developers can do it in 2, right? So.
Yes.
Right. Or the other, if it takes one woman 9 months to have a baby, it must take 9 women 1 month to have a baby, right? We all had that discussion with our managers.
There's another question there.
I just wanted to ask, do you need to use, in order to use OAuth, do you need to use an SSL key to actually get it to work?
You don't need to use an SSL key to make it work. Just like everything else, you should. And if you don't, then you're exposed to a man-in-the-middle of attack when you're passing around your JSON Web Token. So if somebody gets a hold of that token, they can actually impersonate you. So yeah, it would be tricky. Well, it's dangerous, but technically, no, you don't need SSL keys to use it.
Good question.
What about more advanced stuff like user manager, roles, permissions, scopes? How do you manage that with OAuth or OpenID?
So everything that has to do with ACL, basically access control layer, is not part of the standard. So some implementation will give you access to some levels of it. At Auth0, we do have something that kind of helps you to create those roles and access the resource. It's not our specialty. There are solutions that are meant exactly for that. That will work with an authorization server like that uses OAuth. So yeah, it's not really part of the original spec. Anything else? Good. Oh.
One more. I saw him ask before. So go for it.
Could you go into some of the magic that happens behind the scenes when you do the setup?
Some of the magic?
That happens behind the scenes, like you use an OAuth library or demo. What kind of setup happens between the 2 servers, the web server that you're serving your app on and the authorization server?
So the setup that I have, it's only exactly the code that I've shown. Well, I've added a little bit more, but pretty much exactly that code. And I just, run npm start or npm whatever that name of that file. And that's all the setup that I need. That's because I'm using everything on my local machine, obviously. But you could deploy that on completely different servers. You could deploy that on AWS, on different platforms. Your APIs could be a serverless API, so it's often used in serverless environments as well. So the deployment is really just like deploying any other server that you would do. Did that answer your question?
When you set it up with Google, what kind of registration do you have to do for your app on Google?
If you sign up with Google, then it's a nightmare. You have to go create all of your, just like you would do with any other API, you have to go create your APIs and do all of that process. And then there's a few libraries that kind of help to make it easier, but typically you would do all of those REST calls to the API, to the authorization server, to pass in the, or to redirect, then to fetch the information, then to redirect again to get the OpenID stuff. So there's a lot of back and forth. It's not always easy, and as much as we would like to have a standard across all the different companies, they all have little differences. So if you want to use Google and then you also want to add Facebook as a social provider, you'll basically have to redo the whole thing again for Facebook. There are tools to help. Passport is one that helps a lot in Node.js. And basically that's what we try to provide as a solution too. You just have a simple library that you import and everything kind of magically works. Very easy to use. We've got a free tier, which I forgot to mention, which I really should, since they're paying for me to be here. But yeah, so I mean, give it a try. If you ever have questions, you can definitely reach out to me on Twitter. But yeah, for the very specific implementations, I'm not as knowledgeable. Thank you very much for having me.
Guys, we have an unusual treat for you guys. You guys today, Owen stickers. If you want the stickers, come on over and get them. If you want the license, what I want you guys to do, would you be able to do the browser? Is browser the website this gentleman is doing. If you guys have been here before, you know what it is. It's win.bocajs.org. When you do that, it will go ahead and give you a ticket. Win, as in what you want to do today. BocaJS, as in where you are. .org, as in org. Another time that I got to type this. I think that's right. Is that right? You did get a ticket. So, who has it on their phone? You can have it on the phone, your laptop. Don't do both. All right. So let's go ahead and refresh that page. It looks like there are 0 of you guys today. 12 of you guys today. I caught you guys all that. All right. So you guys ready for winner? What we're going to do, again, this is a license for any software under, including, as you see, my friend here is using a WebStorm. Yes. It's fantastic. So PHP Storm, what's it called on the .NET? Refactor? What's it called? The Sharper. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and by the way, you never done C#. How do you know that? You just have a good mind and all that. Yes, all right. So did we get everybody? So look around again. Oh man, there's more of you guys. Okay, so I guess I gave away the fact that you can enter twice. One of you guys has a number, and it's in red. Woohoo! This guy's, wait a minute, did you win the last time? All right, guys. Thank you very much. First Tuesday of the month, every month, no matter what, even if there's a hurricane, all of you guys are safe. I'm here waiting for you guys. Anyways, see you guys next month. Thank you.